Times now has accessed the 83-page affidavit that's been filed by actor Salman Khan after Maharashtra government moved the Supreme Court challenging his acquittal in the 2002 hit-and-run case. Now, Salman in the affidavit says he's been falsely implicated. He reiterates he was not driving the car, that no eyewitnesses or proof about him being at the wheel or him having consumed alcohol have been presented by the prosecution. So he's gone into details in these 83 pages to say the prosecution failed to produce a single eyewitness to prove that he was behind the wheel. On the other side, after defending his own stand and after claiming that he wasn't even driving or present at that time in an inebriated state, Salman then goes on the offensive. He actually takes on the prosecution to say that the injured were tutored by the prosecution, that the prosecution tampered with the documentation. In fact, he also goes on to say that Kamal Khan, who Salman claims was with him in the car that night, was deliberately not examined by the police or the prosecution, and all this while that the cops fabricated evidence, collected random bills, tampered with the evidence to implicate the actor. Timing of the FIR recording is also suspicious. Now, these are some of the just very basic key pointers that we're trying to highlight for you. Rhythm, of course, has more details. She's accessed that 83-page affidavit that's been submitted. Rhythm, this was submitted on 18th of March, but there are two interesting angles to this. Of course, one of how he defends himself, claims that he was not even driving the car. And on the other hand, then he goes on the offensive to say that the prosecution was actually tutoring the injured there.
Absolutely, and Tanvi, this is an 83-page affidavit that is very clearly making out Salman Khan's case that he's been falsely implicated. In fact, right on page 2 of this affidavit, he goes on to say, I have been falsely implicated in this. The prosecution's case is, and he goes on to talk about the prosecution's case, but very interestingly, the first thing that you did say, Tanvi, he says at one point, Kamal Khan being the only other eyewitness, according to the prosecution, was deliberately not examined by the prosecution in the course of the trial. You know, this is just the start of what he's trying to say in these pages, because he is very clearly trying to say that Ravindra Patil gave an inconsistent testimony that was taken into record. In fact, Kapil Sibal also, who's appearing for him, said the entire case against Salman Khan is only based on the testimony of Ravindra Patil, and the High Court in Bombay had disregarded it. At another point, he very clearly, and I'm talking about page 15 of this 83-page affidavit, where he very clearly says, neither was I drinking, nor was I under consuming alcohol, nor was I driving the car. And I quote now from page 15, where he says, it is further pertinent to note that PW, that is the prosecution, does not depose that the respondent was smelling of alcohol or seemed to be under the influence of alcohol when he left JW Marriott Hotel. At another point, he says, it is not believed that in fact the respondent drove to or from JW Marriott. Not a single eyewitness could be found by the prosecution to depose to this effect that he was driving. At another point, he says, and this is several times in this 83-page affidavit that he continues to say, the eyewitnesses have been tutored. He says that in fact it's very shocking to even think that those people who were injured on that night could be able to think that I was coming out of the car. How could they even know? Because they were under so much stress. How could they even know that I was coming out of the car on that night? They were in such pain on that night. In fact, I'm quoting from page 20, where he says, it's important that while the injured were clearly tutored by the prosecution to give identical stories in their evidences, there are material inconsistencies. So several times during this 83-page affidavit, he goes on to say that they were tutored. Now remember, there's two things that are there against him in this affidavit, Tanvi. One is the fact that he says he was not driving. For that, he says that there were two drivers on that night who were driving for him. One driver who was there for the earlier part of the night, and the other driver who came in much later. The second point that he says is he was not under the duress of alcohol. This is one point that the Attorney General, speaking for the Maharashtra state in the Supreme Court in the last hearing, had continued to say Salman Khan had alcohol in his body. That was twice as much as had been there. It was several times more than what any normal person would have. However, in this affidavit, at several places, he says that the blood samples, the way they were taken, the way they were collected, there was tampering, there was not the right procedure, the standard procedure had not been followed. So very clearly, brick by brick, Salman Khan and his lawyers have which they say, number one, he's been falsely implicated. Number two, he was not behind the wheel of the car. Number three, he was having alcohol. So very clearly, a systematic response, a systematic defense by Salman Khan to try and get an acquittal from the top court.
Yes, in fact, Rhythm, I was just going to ask you, how this goes about responding to each part of the appeal that was filed by the Maharashtra government. Of course, in January earlier this year is when the Maharashtra government moved to the Supreme Court, if I'm not mistaken. And the Salman's affidavit literally is a point-by-point rebuttal to every aspect that's been raised by the Maharashtra government.
Absolutely. In fact, point one that the Maharashtra government in the top court also said is he was behind the wheel of the car. He says, I was not behind the wheel. He also says Ravindra Patil's testimony is the only one taken into consideration. He questions severely from page 3 onwards why Kamal Khan has not been examined. In fact, he says Kamal Khan was in the car. His testimony has deliberately not been taken, and that's the word that he's used. He says deliberately Kamal Khan has not been examined. So questions being raised as to why the prosecution was so weak. In fact, remember there were reports earlier that the Maharashtra government, when it was giving the defense, there were severe gaps and lapses in the way investigation was conducted in the Salman Khan drinking driving case, and there were things that were told by the seniors that the Maharashtra government had to follow. Salman Khan also using that, and at one point he says at page 28, the prosecution has failed to prove that the respondent's blood sample was not tampered with or contaminated, and that it was the respondent's blood sample which was sent to the FSL for analysis. On the contrary, the evidence establishes the entire sequence of events regarding the blood samples is seriously flawed, completely undeniable, and should be discarded by a court. This is something we are seeing several times along in this 83-page affidavit. So one thing is clear. Whether it was the fact that the Maharashtra government is saying that he was sitting behind the wheel of the car, he says his driver Ashok Singh was sitting behind the wheel of the car. At one point he says that in fact I only got out from the driver's seat when that accident happened because there was such a violent mob that had collected around me. So some witnesses saw me getting out of the car from the driver's side. That actually happened, but the reason is because there were other people who had collected on the left side of the car from which I had to get down. Other than that, he says the way the blood samples were collected is absolutely incorrect. The standard procedure was not followed. The ward boy was not who collected the sample, who sealed the sample, was not examined. So several times he says that the police had tutored the witnesses. Several times he says that there was manufactured defenses. In fact, he at one time says that to falsely implicate him, there were bills at Rain Bar. That's the bar that he was at on that night that were taken by the police. So questions now also being raised on the Maharashtra police here by Salman Khan. And two things he clearly says, I've been falsely implicated. I was not consuming alcohol that night. And number two, I was not driving that night. Kamal Khan's testimony has not been taken. The entire case of the Maharashtra government is only based on the testimony of Ravindra Patil that has severe inconsistencies. One has to see what has been said by the High Court and has to acquit me in the top court also.
Now, Rhythm, a point that was made in the appeal by the Maharashtra government was also to say that the Bombay High Court has not concluded as to who was really driving the vehicle, if it wasn't Salman Khan. Now, in any way, have you spotted anything yet that addresses this aspect? Because this is something that the government will definitely focus on when the case, arguments begin at Supreme Court.
Absolutely. In fact, this is something that he speaks about from page 11 onwards in his testimony. And he talks about two drivers here. One's name is Altaf. He says Altaf was not well and therefore Ashok Singh was called. He says the said vehicle arrived at Marriott where we were. Altaf had told the respondent, that is Salman Khan, that he was not feeling well and wanted to go home. Altaf said he would be calling another driver, Ashok Singh. This is the case of Salman Khan, that in fact it was Ashok Singh who was driving the car. On page 12 he says, as Ashok Singh had not yet arrived, the respondent Salman Khan occupied the driver's seat of the said vehicle, turned on the AC of the vehicle and waited for Ashok Singh to arrive. Ravindra Patil stood outside on the right side of the vehicle near the driver's side of the door. When Ashok Singh arrived at the Porsche of JW Marriott, he sat on the driver's seat and Salman Khan moved to the front left side. In fact, this is very crucial because on page 13, it very clearly says that Salman Khan moved to the front left side. Very clearly, Salman Khan's defense therefore going to be Ashok Singh was driving the car. He's been falsely implicated. The evidence against him has been tutored. It's been collected. It's been tampered with. This 83-page affidavit that's exclusively been accessed by your channel very clearly indicates that defense has been made by Salman Khan brick by brick. They have stated that in fact Salman was not under the influence of alcohol and he was not driving the car on that fateful night of 2002 when that accident occurred.
All right, Rhythm, thanks so much for getting us all of those details. Rhythm has exclusively accessed that 83-page affidavit as the battle now continues in Supreme Court between the prosecution, the Maharashtra government and Salman Khan. Rhythm, thanks for joining us.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.